Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stein, your testimony is, let me ask this. Mr. Fine made the point that you declined to provide DOD or his office with data because it fell below, at or below the $2 million threshold in contract value. Is that correct?
I think at the time of the contracting it was $750,000, but I defer to my colleague.
No, my question is you declined. I'm asking you to corroborate what he asserted.
Okay. I think it was $750,000 at the time of the awards, not $2 million, because that was a...
But is it accurate that you declined to provide that information voluntarily?
We agree to all the laws and rules and regulations.
Yeah, we stipulate that, Mr. Stein. My question again is Mr. Fine accurate that, in fact, you declined to provide information his office requested using the threshold as the reason why you did not have to?
If I could,
yes.
They declined to provide to the contracting officer when the contracting officer requested in 15 of the 16 times.
Okay. Mr. Stein, is that accurate?
I'm confused. Can you rephrase the question?
Mr. Fine said that the contract officer had requested information, and you said, we're not going to provide it because we're not required to because it falls below $2 million.
That's not true. If it falls below $750,000 at the time, we said that...
Mr. Fine?
I think he's debating the issue of what the threshold was at the time. Whatever the threshold was at the time, they were asked to provide the cost, and they declined to do it in 15
Is that
of the
accurate,
16.
That's accurate.
That is accurate. Thank you. Now, is it the policy of your company deliberately to restructure the value of contracts so that you fall below that threshold? For example, we had one former TransDigm sales director who told the committee, and I quote, "We were coached on how to structure agreements. It was suggested to us that we use shorter agreements. Don't sign long-term agreements. We were encouraged to use excuses." Is that an accurate statement in terms of the policy of your company?
I don't think so. We do not have a policy that does anything but to agree with...
You're under oath. Is it your testimony that nobody was ever coached to do that?
No, no one was ever coached to split a contract.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any instance where that happened.
All right,
period.
good. You're on record.
Yes, I'm not aware of any instance where that happened.
That employee went on to provide an example. He said, and I quote, "The government asked for a multi-year solicitation of Black Hawk parts. We, however, shortened the term of the contract to 9 months so that we wouldn't go over TINA." Is it your testimony that he's wrong, that that did not happen?
I have no idea the details of this part or the testimony that this person is giving.
That's not my question. Are you familiar with the fact that there was a multi-year solicitation of Black Hawk parts?
No.
That doesn't ring a bell with you?
No, it didn't ring a bell with me.
All right. So we have testimony from one of your former employees that contradicts what you've just said here under oath, that in fact it was the strategy of your company to do that. Mr. Fine or Ms. Hull, any evidence about that?
For the purposes of our audit, I can't speak to TransDigm intentionally keeping dollar values under a certain threshold, but what I can say is that the majority of the parts in our sample, which is proportionate to the percentage of contracts they have, are predominantly under the simplified acquisition threshold.
Sure looks like a strategy to me. Mr. Stein, you have repeatedly said in your testimony today in response to questions that you look at the commercial value of products and what you provide is largely commercial. Ms. Hull, you said, if I understood correctly, of the, I think you said 47 parts you looked at, only 4 would fit that category.
Only 4 of the 47 parts were
Right.
commercial.
Do you dispute that, Mr. Stein?
I do.
Do you want to elaborate?
We have commercial packages that have been submitted on all of these. These are commercial parts. They fall under the FAR Part 12 of commercial in type, so that the commercial prices are legitimate.
Ms. Hull?
The contracting officer, in this case, made the decision that 4 were commercial, not more than 4 for our sample.
Mr. Stein says that's just not accurate.
It is up to the contracting officer to determine whether a part is commercial. And in this case, for those 4 parts, they made the commercial item determination that just 4 were commercial.
Mr. Fine or Ms. Fahey, before my time's up, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment on that.
No, I would agree, and we have
You would agree with what?
that the low number that is considered commercial, and we have a more laborious process to decide whether somebody's commercial or not.
So, Mr. Fine.
No, I agree with Ms. Holt. This is a decision made by the contracting officer and DLA in this case. What was commercial, and 4 times they were determined to be commercial, the rest were not.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I yield back my time, I just want to note, this is very troubling because we have the government saying that only 4 of the parts, in fact, would be defined as commercial, and we have the contractor saying, no, no, they're all commercial. We have employees who have told us that they were told not to talk about cost directly by Mr. Howley, and Mr. Howley says he does not recall ever making that statement to employees. We have employees telling this committee that the company deliberately restructured contracts and agreements to fall below a certain dollar threshold so that they would not have to provide data to the government. And we have Mr. Stein under oath denying that was not the policy of his company. And it just seems to me we have an awful lot of contradictions and very different point of view between the government, who's the recipient of these services, and the company providing them, and the company's own former employees. And I would just say to both Mr. Stein and Mr. Howley, you'd better be right, because you're under oath. And it would be my hope that this committee will vigorously follow up on this testimony and corroborate or not what we've just heard here today. I thank the chair.